good friend, Super Bowl champion coach, BYU football alumnus, and all-around good guy, Brian Billick. Follow him at Coach Billick on the Twitter machine. Coach, we're in Las Vegas at the West Coast Conference basketball media days. We needed the football timeout, so do you want to talk some basketball with us?
Well, yeah, when things are struggling like that, you're always looking for the next season. So how's BYU going to be in basketball this year?
Well, the league is loaded. Gonzaga just went to the national championship game last year. They're always good. St. Mary's is a top 25 team. Could be the preseason number one. We'll see here in the next hour. So BYU hopefully can finish in the top three there. That's the hope.
Well, that's saying a lot. That's good. I tell you what, some of my fondest memories are going to the Big Mac and seeing some good basketball. In fact, on my honeymoon, I brought my wife back to Utah to go to a BYU basketball game, BYU-Utah basketball game.
Now, you just brought up an old nickname that's not maybe known to the younger folks, the Big Mac, because it looked like a Big Mac from the outside. Can you give us an idea of kind of you were around, when it was brand new and whatnot? The Marriott Activity Center?
Yeah, I'm that old. It was actually new. They had just opened it up. The magnificent arena, of course. And obviously it was a Mac, and so everybody called it the Big Mac. And it was great, boy. When that thing gets rocking and you get, some good games going in there. I used to, when I was playing, that was back when you used to get what they called laundry money. They used to get like $15 a month, laundry money cash that the school could give you, but you had to work for it. And you did. So my job, I had a great job my senior year. I got to guard the officials at basketball games.
Oh, nice.
They used to walk. The officials' locker room was right there in the tunnel. It was all about 10 feet. And they went from there onto the court and the court back to the locker room. And Dave Matera and I think it was, used to sit and would sit and walk the 10 feet with the officials onto the field, onto the court, and then back off the court. It was a pretty good gig.
Oh, that's fantastic. Brian Billick with us on BYU Sports Nation. How good was BYU basketball in that atmosphere if you wanted to take your wife back on your honeymoon to a basketball game?
Did you watch Kresimir Ćosić play in person?
You know what? That was a little before me.
Okay.
I'm not quite that old, I don't think. But I did. I mean, obviously, that was a big, and that was a time when we did have a lot of foreign players come in. Had a lot of foreign people on the track team as well. They used to recruit nationally, internationally, I should say. Yeah, we came back on a ski honeymoon after I got married, and had to take it a BYU-Utah game. It was great. It was a buzzer beater at the end.
Oh, fantastic.
I think when Spencer originally brought up the question, we were kidding, but we have actually talked basketball for about 2 minutes, which was pretty awesome.
There's nothing you can't handle, Coach. We put you on the spot.
You got it.
You knocked it out of the park. Okay, now we'll get to football. East Carolina, not good on defense. The nation's worst defense, as a matter of fact. 50 points allowed a game and 600 yards. If BYU is going to do something well on offense, it has to be this week, right?
Yeah, you would think so, but boy, is that a lot of pressure now. You're right. I'm not real familiar with ECU, and obviously they are struggling. I mean, right now BYU is just struggling to find that identity. Obviously Mississippi State was good, but when a team can just physically manhandle you that way, run the ball the way Mississippi State did, boy, it's an empty feeling. There's not much you can do, and BYU's just not that good right now. And so it's really all about, we talked about it last week, you got to give these young people something to hang their hat on, try to just find individually and collectively a way to get better, take on the challenge 1 week at a time. Don't carry the sins of the past games in. Don't worry about the future. If this is a matchup, obviously, you got to find where those matchups are. And, try to find something you can hang your hat on, some rhythm in the running game, or maybe some big explosive passes down the field.
Brian, the team quickly dismisses the idea that the BYU schedule is much easier in the back six, which there's no Power 5 team and there's no Group of 5 team that is there. 5 of the 6 have losing records, whatnot. They're more on BYU's level, I think, at this point in terms of record and production. Why wouldn't it get at least a little better? Because BYU dismisses that idea quickly, maybe out of respect for each of the opponents. But I look at the schedule and I go, listen, BYU should have some more success. Well,
when you're sitting there, 1-5 or something like that, yeah, that falls on deaf ears to say, oh yeah, this second half of the schedule is going to be easier. You just don't think like that. And again, we're a league of, okay, it's all about this week. We don't look beyond this week. And this week's opponent has had some difficulties. We've got to take advantage of it. You look at the film and you see some things that concern you, and that's what you've got to keep your team focused on. But I can't imagine anybody on the BYU football team right now feels like they can overlook anybody.
Did you see anything on the field last week in Starkville when BYU played at Mississippi State that makes you feel like the offense is starting to do something positive and maybe could turn a corner here in this week or the next few weeks?
Well, it comes back to the same thing. You know, they've got to run the ball better. They got to fit up better. They've got to better on third down. You got to keep drives alive, obviously. And as we talked about, you've got to find a way to develop explosive plays. I mean, it is so hard, whether it's a college game, the pro game, to think that you're going to go 10, 12 play drives on a consistent basis. This is a game of turnovers and big plays. Unless you can be so physically overwhelming that you run the ball, and particularly against a team like you saw with Mississippi State that was capable of just running the ball at will. That is an empty feeling for a team. And you got to find a way to counteract that. You got to come up with big plays. You know, we used to have a number count. If we didn't generate a play of 20 yards or more within a play count of about 10, because they're going to happen organically as well, then you had to try to make something happen. Otherwise, you just slowly bleed to death trying to be conservative, efficient. You just got to find some way to change the field position, if not come up with a score.
Bloodletting was cool in like the 1400s. Not cool in 2017 offense for BYU, that's for sure. BYU is going 2 time zones away to East Carolina. When you went from Baltimore all the way west to play the Seahawks, the Niners, the Raiders, and whatnot, did you treat that differently or in a certain way so that the travel didn't affect the product on the field?
You do, and sometimes as a coach you do too much. You know, it's well documented. The West Coast, East Coast, that's a tough one because the time changing teams on the West Coast seem to struggle a little bit more on the East Coast than the East Coast teams going west. At the end of the day, it's are you a good team or not? You know, teams that are good teams tend to travel well and play well. I remember because we were the extremes when we were going to San Diego or Seattle or San Francisco, that East Coast to West Coast. I remember one year I tried to keep the players on body time. And so every time was listed in West Coast / East Coast times, just to give them a sense of, see, this is if it's 6 o'clock on the East Coast, on the West Coast, then it's 9 o'clock on the East Coast. So this is what you'd be doing. And finally, Ray Lewis came to me and said, Coach, I don't know if I'm coming or going. I don't know what time I don't know if it's East Coast, West Coast. If I'm supposed to be there at this time or that time, you're killing me with these schedules. So I learned then it was okay. I'll try to simplify this for you if you can. But as a coach, yeah, you try to keep it on as best you can on body time. I always worried more a little bit about when I had to make a West Coast run or an East Coast run, depending upon where I was at. The following week, you had to give your players a chance to kind of get back on body time. The game itself, they'll work into that. It'll be fine. But the schedule that they get on when they come back from a East Coast or West Coast run was where I tried to put more attention on.
At Coach Billick on Twitter. Coach, I always love this question because it changes sometimes from a week-to-week basis. Who's the best team in the National Football League right now?
Well, everybody's coming back to the middle, aren't they? I mean, you got some outliers like Cleveland and San Francisco, obviously. But whether it's Kansas City, whether it's New England, everybody is showing their warts, so to speak. You have a team like Pittsburgh that last week against Jacksonville, you're wondering, well, how good is this team? And then they come out and they beat Kansas City in Kansas City. What was impressive last week is the wins that we had some teams that were on the road. You know, New York beating Denver in Denver. How do you account for that? Chicago beating Baltimore in Baltimore. So what it tells you is the league is all coming back to the middle. There are some good teams. Good matchup this week. We got Philadelphia and Washington, which is going to be an excellent game. That obviously Atlanta at New England. And New England's it's funny. New England, after the early losses, they're kind of under the radar right now. But they're getting back to playing pretty good, although their defense is really giving up way too many. We talk about big plays. They're 29th in the league in giving up big plays. That's got to change. So, yeah, I think we got a lot of pretty good teams. Some people think that's the reason why viewing is off. It's down about 7-8%, notwithstanding all the controversy about the knee or take a knee and all that kind of stuff. But the viewership was down about 8% last year. So I know people in the league are concerned. Part of it is that they feel like the league is kind of muddled in this mediocrity, that there are no really great teams.
Coach, you are in postseason form in the midseason. We appreciate the time, whether it's BYU basketball, football, or the NFL. Great stuff. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, guys.